Let me tell you something that most people only realize when it's already too late. There are two kinds of pain in this world. There is the pain of discipline, and there is the pain of regret. And the strange truth, one that almost nobody understands when they are young, is that both will hurt you, but only one will build you. Think about this for a moment. A young man once came to me, not in person, but through life itself. He had energy, ambition, dreams bigger than his current bank account, bigger than his current situation, bigger than his current discipline. He said, I want to become rich early. I don't want to wait until I'm old. And I asked him one simple question. Are you willing to become the kind of person who deserves it? Because wealth is not just about money. Wealth is about character that can carry money without collapsing under it. Let me tell you something I learned years ago. Most people don't fail because they don't know what to do. They fail because they refuse to do what they already know. And when I look at youth today, I see something beautiful and something dangerous. Beautiful because there is fire, dangerous because there is impatience. Everybody wants fast money, but nobody wants slow discipline. Everybody wants freedom, but nobody wants structure. Everybody wants to shine, but nobody wants to be forged in silence. And here's the truth that will either disturb you or wake you up. Money is not first an economic problem. It is a personal development problem. Now listen to me carefully. If you want to become rich in your youth, not later, not someday, but early enough to enjoy your life while your body still has strength, your mind still has sharpness, your energy still has fire, then you must understand principles, not motivation, because motivation fades. But principles will carry you through storms. And there are 5 principles that separate those who rise early in life from those who spend their youth preparing to live, but never actually living. The first principle is this: focus on every lesson. Not just the easy ones. Not just the exciting ones. Not just the ones that make you feel smart. Every lesson. Let me explain something that most people miss completely. Life is always teaching, but it does not announce the lesson before it arrives. Sometimes the lesson comes as failure. Sometimes it comes as rejection. Sometimes it comes as embarrassment. Sometimes it comes as a job you didn't get, a deal that fell apart, a friend who betrayed you, a plan that collapsed in your hands. And most people, they waste those moments. They complain. They escape. They distract themselves. But the rich mind does something different. It asks, what is this trying to teach me? I knew a man once who failed in business 3 times before he became successful. And every time he failed, he wrote down what he called the hidden lesson. He didn't say, I am unlucky. He didn't say people are dishonest. He said, what did I miss? And that question changed everything. Because when you focus on the lesson, you stop repeating the same life in different costumes. Let me tell you something powerful. If you do not extract lessons from pain, you will be forced to repeat the pain until you learn. That is how life works. Not punishment, repetition. Now the second principle. Multiple streams of income. Here's what most people don't understand. One income is not just risky. It is fragile. It is like standing on one leg in a storm and hoping you don't fall. And yet millions of people build their entire lives on a single source of income. And they call it stability. But I call it dependency. Think about it. One employer, one salary, one economy, one opportunity, one mistake, and everything shakes. And then they wonder why anxiety is so common, why stress is so normal, why sleep feels heavy. Because deep down, the mind knows the truth. If this stops, I stop. Now I want you to understand something very carefully. Wealthy people do not rely on one stream of water. They build rivers, they build systems. They build assets that work even when they sleep. And I am not just talking about money. I am talking about skill stacking. I am talking about learning one thing, then adding another, then combining them until you become rare. Because in today's world, being average at one thing is not enough. But being valuable in multiple ways, that creates leverage. Let me say it differently. If you only have one skill, you rent your life. But when you have multiple skills, you start to own your life. And ownership is where freedom begins. Now listen closely. There was a young man I once observed who worked a normal job during the day. But at night, when everyone was sleeping, he was learning digital skills, building small projects, testing ideas, failing quietly, improving silently. Nobody clapped for him. Nobody noticed him. Nobody believed anything special was happening. But something was happening. He was building options. And options are the beginning of wealth, because wealth is not just money. Wealth is options, the ability to say yes or no without fear, the ability to walk away without collapse, the ability to choose your life instead of accept it. Now the third principle, simplicity. This is where most people destroy their own progress without even realizing it. They think success is about adding more noise, more spending, more comparison, more complexity. But true wealth often begins with subtraction. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. Most people do not have a money problem. They have a consumption problem. They earn and immediately reduce their future. They buy things to impress people who are also struggling. They upgrade their lifestyle before they upgrade their discipline. And then they say, money is hard. No control is hard. Discipline is hard. Saying no is hard, but without it, everything becomes harder later. I learned something powerful years ago. Every unnecessary expense is not just money leaving your pocket. It is future opportunity leaving your life. Think about that. When you spend without purpose, you are not just losing money. You are losing the seed of something that could have multiplied. And simplicity is not poverty. Simplicity is clarity. It is the removal of noise so that focus becomes possible. And focus is where acceleration begins. Now the fourth principle, savings, but not the way most people think. Most people think savings is what is left over. But wealthy thinking says savings is what is protected first. There is a psychological shift here that changes everything. When you save first, you are telling your mind, I matter in the future. I am building something beyond today. I am not just reacting to life. I am designing it. And this small shift creates something powerful inside you. Self-respect. Because saving is not about money. It is about identity. It is about becoming someone who does not destroy their own future for temporary comfort. Let me tell you a story. A young worker once told me, I don't earn enough to save. And I asked him, do you think saving depends on how much you earn? He said, yes. And I said, that is why you will always feel poor. Because saving is not about amount. It is about habit. Even small amounts, when consistent, create something most people never experience. Momentum. And momentum is invisible at first, but over time, it becomes unstoppable. Now, the fifth principle, the art of taking risks. And this is where most people freeze because they misunderstand risk. They think risk is danger, but real risk is not taking any risk at all. Think about this. Every successful person you admire today took a moment where they stepped into uncertainty. They did not have guarantees. They had decisions. And decisions are the bridges between where you are and where you could be. But let me be very clear with you. There is a difference between reckless risk and intelligent risk. Reckless risk is emotion without understanding. Intelligent risk is preparation meeting opportunity. I once met a man who said, I want to start something, but I'm afraid of failing. And I told him, you will fail either way. He looked confused, and I said, if you try and fail, you gain experience. If you don't try and fail, you lose potential. But either way, failure exists. The only question is whether it builds you or haunts you. Silence, because that truth is uncomfortable, but necessary. Now think about your own life. How many ideas have you buried? How many opportunities have you delayed? How many conversations have you avoided? How many decisions are waiting for courage that never arrives? And here's what I want you to understand deeply. Risk is not about jumping blindly. Risk is about trusting your preparation more than your fear, because fear always speaks first. But wisdom speaks deeper. And if you listen long enough, you begin to realize something strange. Most of your limitations are not real. They are untested beliefs, stories you inherited, fears you never challenged. And the moment you challenge them, they start to disappear. But here's where everything connects. Focus on lessons builds intelligence. Multiple income streams build security. Simplicity builds clarity. Savings builds discipline, and risk-taking builds expansion. And when all five begin to operate together, something changes in a person. They stop living reactively. They stop waiting for permission. They stop chasing approval, and they start building something that feels almost unstoppable. Because they are no longer just living life, they are designing it. And I want you to imagine something right now. Imagine waking up with clarity instead of confusion. Imagine working with purpose instead of pressure. Imagine making decisions without fear controlling every move. Imagine your life slowly compounding, not in chaos, but in direction. Because compounding is not just financial. It is behavioral. It is emotional. It is spiritual. Small disciplines repeated daily do not stay small. They multiply, they expand, they return with interest. And most people underestimate this completely. They think one bad habit is small, but they do not see what it becomes in 5 years. And they think one good habit is insignificant, but they do not see what it becomes in 5 years. And that is why life feels mysterious to many people. But it is not mysterious. It is mathematical. And somewhere in that mathematics of life, there is a turning point where everything begins to shift, where your choices stop being random and start becoming directional, where your discipline begins to create identity, and that identity begins to pull opportunities towards you in ways you did not expect. And you start noticing that people who once seemed ahead of you are no longer ahead, not because they fell, but because you finally started building in a way that compounds instead of consumes. And you start to realize that time is not your enemy, but your most powerful partner when you learn how to use it correctly. When you stop wasting mornings, when you stop postponing decisions, when you stop negotiating with your own potential. Because every time you negotiate with your potential, you lose a little piece of your future self. And I want you to feel that clearly, not as fear, but as awareness. Because awareness is where transformation quietly begins. And when awareness begins to grow inside a person, something very subtle starts to happen. Something most people never notice until it is already shaping their destiny. And that is the moment they start seeing themselves differently in the mirror of their own decisions. Not as who they claim to be, not as who they wish they were, but as who their daily actions are quietly proving them to be. Let me tell you something very few people ever admit to themselves. Your future is not being created in your big moments. It is being created in your invisible ones. The moments no one claps for, the moments no one records, the moments no one even knows exist. Think about this. A young man once told me, I don't understand why I'm not progressing. I think I need a big opportunity. And I asked him, what are you doing when nothing is happening? He stayed silent, because that is where truth lives. Not in speeches, not in plans, not in dreams, but in what you do when there is no pressure forcing you. And I want you to feel this deeply. The world does not reward intention. It rewards repetition. And repetition always exposes identity, because you can lie in words, but you cannot lie in patterns. Now listen carefully. There is a hidden battle that every young person goes through when they try to become wealthy early in life. It is not the battle of money. It is not the battle of opportunity. It is the battle between comfort and growth. And comfort is very dangerous, because comfort never announces itself as an enemy. It arrives like peace. It feels like rest. It looks like, I deserve this. But slowly, silently, it becomes delay. And delay becomes identity. And identity becomes destiny. Think about that for a moment. Most people are not stuck because they cannot move forward. They are stuck because they keep negotiating with comfort every single day. I will start tomorrow. I will try next week. I just need more time. But time is not waiting for you to become ready. Time is already investing in someone else who started imperfectly. And that is something most people cannot accept because it means success is not about intelligence. It is about action under uncertainty. Let me tell you something I learned observing life over and over again. The people who become rich early are not always the smartest. They are the most consistent in discomfort. They are the ones who can sit with uncertainty without running away. They are the ones who can feel fear and still move. And that is a skill, not a talent. A skill that is built in small, invisible moments. Now think about this deeply. Every time you avoid a difficult task, you are not avoiding the task. You are shaping your future tolerance for difficulty. And every time you push through discomfort, you are not just completing a task. You are expanding your identity. You are becoming someone who can handle more life. And life always gives more to those who can handle more. That is not philosophy. That is structure. That is how reality organizes itself. Now let me bring you back to something very practical again. Multiple income streams. Because I want you to understand something beyond just financial advice. When you rely on one stream, you are not just financially limited. You are mentally limited because your decisions become dependent. Your choices become cautious. Your creativity becomes restricted by fear. But when you begin to build even one extra stream, something changes inside you. You stop thinking like someone who is waiting, and you start thinking like someone who is building. And that shift, that invisible shift, is where everything begins. I knew a young man who started with nothing but curiosity, no support, no guidance, no blueprint. But he started learning skills at night after his job. He did not post about it. He did not announce it. He did not wait for validation. And slowly, something strange happened. He stopped asking, can I do this? And started asking, what else can I build? That is identity transformation, not loud, not dramatic, but powerful enough to change the entire direction of a life. Now listen to me very carefully. There will always be people who say, take it slow, don't rush, be realistic. And there is wisdom in patience, yes. But there is also danger in disguised fear. Because sometimes what people call being realistic is just their own limitations speaking through advice. And if you listen to the wrong voices for too long, you start inheriting their ceiling. And you stop building your own. Now I want you to imagine something. Imagine your life 5 years from now, not based on hope, but based on your current habits multiplied, not your dreams, your habits. Because habits are the only honest prediction system life uses. And if your habits remain unchanged, your life will not suddenly transform because you wished hard enough. But if your habits evolve even slightly, consistently, quietly, everything begins to shift. And that is where the real power is, not in motivation, but in accumulation. Now let's go back to simplicity for a moment, because this principle is more powerful than people realize. Simplicity is not about having less. It is about needing less. And when you need less, you become dangerous in the best possible way. Because now decisions are not controlled by pressure. They are controlled by purpose. Think about someone who is financially dependent on appearances. They cannot take risks easily. They cannot explore opportunities freely. They cannot change direction without fear. But someone who has simplified their life, someone who has reduced unnecessary weight, they move differently, they think differently, they act differently, because their life is not constantly demanding maintenance. And that freedom, that internal freedom, becomes a weapon. Now I want to bring you into something deeper. Savings. But not just saving money, saving energy, saving attention, saving emotional bandwidth. Because modern life is not just a financial trap. It is an attention trap. Everything is designed to pull you away from your focus. Everything is competing for your mind. And if your attention is scattered, your life will be scattered. So saving becomes not just financial discipline. It becomes mental protection. It becomes the ability to say, not everything deserves me. And that realization alone changes how you move through the world. Now, risk. Let me take you deeper into risk. because most people misunderstand it at a very emotional level. They think risk means losing. But the truth is, avoiding risk is also a loss. It is a slow loss, a silent loss, a loss of potential, a loss of possibilities that never got tested. And that kind of loss does not hurt immediately. It hurts later when you look back and realize, I could have. And those two words, I could have, carry more weight than almost any failure ever will. Because failure says, you tried and learned. But regret says, you never tried at all. And that is why risk, when intelligent, becomes essential. Because it keeps your life alive in motion. It keeps your identity expanding. It keeps your future open. And I want you to understand something very clearly. Every level of life you desire is on the other side of discomfort you are currently avoiding, not someday, not in theory, but right now, in decisions you are postponing, in conversations you are delaying, in actions you are hesitating on, and somewhere in that hesitation, there is a version of you trying to emerge, trying to break through the limits you inherited, trying to become something more than what your current environment expects from you. And the strange thing is that life keeps offering small doors, subtle openings, quiet opportunities that most people walk past because they are waiting for something bigger, something louder, something more obvious. But growth rarely arrives in dramatic form. It usually arrives disguised as responsibility, disguised as discipline, disguised as effort that feels slightly uncomfortable at first, but later becomes the very foundation of everything you build. And if you miss enough of those small doors, you eventually find yourself standing in front of life, wondering why nothing significant is changing, even though time has been passing, even though days have been moving forward, even though years are accumulating quietly in the background. And if you are hearing this right now, really hearing it, not just listening, but feeling it somewhere deep inside your chest, then understand something very important about this exact moment. This is not just another video passing through your day. This is a turning point, only if you allow it to become one. Because life does not change when you hear something powerful. Life changes when you decide in silence, with no audience, with no applause, with no guarantee that you are no longer going to live the same way again. Let me tell you something that most people only understand too late. The future you are walking toward is not built by tomorrow's decisions. It is built by the decision you make after this moment ends. Right after this feeling fades, right after motivation tries to leave your body, right after comfort starts whispering again, that is where your real life begins. And I want you to imagine something very real, not fantasy, not motivation, reality. Imagine meeting yourself 5 years from now. Not the version you hope for, but the version your current habits are silently building. Would you be proud of him? Would you recognize him? Would he thank you or question you? Because somewhere in the future, there is a version of you that will carry everything you choose today. Every discipline you respect, every excuse you reject, every risk you avoid or embrace, every morning you show up or disappear from. And that version of you is not created by luck. It is created by repetition. And repetition does not care about your emotions. It only cares about your decisions. Think about this deeply. Every great life you admire was once just a normal person who refused to negotiate with their potential one more time, one more day of discipline, one more attempt after failure, one more decision when it felt uncomfortable, one more step when nobody was watching. And slowly, those one mores became a life that looks impossible from the outside. But it was never magic. It was never luck. It was consistency. And now listen to me carefully. You will not always feel ready. You will not always feel confident. You will not always feel strong. But none of that matters. Because greatness was never built by people who felt ready. It was built by people who moved anyway, even with fear, even with doubt, even with uncertainty in their hands. And I need you to understand this at a level deeper than motivation. Your life will not rise to your thoughts. It will fall or rise to your discipline. So if you change nothing, nothing will change. But if you change even one thing starting today, just one habit, just one decision, just one small act of consistency, you are no longer the same person you were before this moment. Because destiny does not shift in explosions. It shifts in small, invisible choices that compound until one day you wake up and realize you are standing in a completely different life. And maybe right now, you feel like you are far from where you want to be. But distance is not the problem. Direct it is. Because if you are moving in the right direction, even slowly, even imperfectly, even quietly, you are still ahead of the person who is standing still with perfect excuses. And I want to leave you with something that should stay with you long after this voice is gone. One day, you will look back at this phase of your life, and you will either thank yourself for having the courage to change, or you will wish you had taken it seriously when it mattered. There is no middle ground in that moment. Only pride or regret. And I know which one feels heavier. So don't wait for a perfect day. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Don't wait for motivation to stay. Because motivation is not your savior. Action is. And your life is not waiting for permission. It is waiting for participation. So whatever you decide after this moment, decide it fully, not halfway, not temporarily, not emotionally, but intentionally. Because somewhere inside you, there is a version of you that already knows what needs to be done. And that version is not asking for comfort. It is asking for courage. It is asking for discipline. It is asking for consistency when nobody is watching. And if you answer that call even once today, just once, you will never see your life the same way again. Because once a person proves to themselves that they can change, there is no going back to who they used to be. And from that point forward, everything, absolutely everything, begins to shift in ways you cannot yet imagine